Good afternoon. Sorry about the technical problems which we had, but I'm sure you got the gist of what Sumit was going to say. And we'll take it from there, and let's talk about what's happening in the whole environmental sustainability with respect to technology and digitalization from Shell's perspective for ourselves and what we're doing for society. Okay? Before we start, I would like to make the classical disclaimer in terms of, the definitions in the cautionary note, in terms of what is, to be checked up. And there are a lot of things which you've got to see on the website, and there are things which are published domain information, which is being shared here in all true faith. Yeah, thank you. Our journey in the digitalization is kind of combination of the energy transition and the decarbonization which we are doing with respect to our own goals towards a net zero. And everyone knows about that. We've got a 2050 goal of net zero. But we started this journey as a kind of a combination of an energy transition and digitalization. And I think the next 10 years will shape the mega trends, both in terms of the transition and the digitalization. And both will have a profound impact on how everyone's lives will be on this planet. Definitely there's a lot of challenge in the world today. A lot of people have talked about it, tackling the climate change and also moving to net zero. But at the same time, there's a demand for energy. There's a huge demand for energy from all the people all over the world. How do you match that, and how do you use technology to ensure there's energy available, but it's also sustainable? And how do you then also reduce the footprint of the energy and the whole carbon while doing all of this at the same time? The International Energy Agency recently reported that half of the reductions of CO2 emissions by 2050 will need to come from new technologies. Sumit was mentioning some of that in his earlier speech. And many of them are in either a prototype or just about kind of taking off into a pilot. So there's an exciting opportunity, and Shell is playing a huge part in several of them. In fact, interestingly, the 10 things which he was talking about, practically in all of them we are present. I'll be talking to you about a few of them in the next few minutes. But major innovations from digitalization, including in AI, cloud, blockchain, deep data, high-performance computing, physics-based modeling, and computational science, all of these will play a role in the kind of transition and the kind of decarbonization which we've all set a goal towards. Yeah? And if you look at some of the reports which have been published beyond what the Energy Commission talks about, the technology majors like Microsoft or PCW, just a few levers on technology, just AI, for example, can lead to 4% reduction by 2030 in the greenhouse gas emission worldwide. And just to give you an idea, that's equivalent to 2.4 gigaton of carbon dioxide. And that's kind of equivalent to the annual emissions of 3 major developed countries, Australia, Canada, and Japan combined. So there's a fantastic opportunity in technology and digitalization towards this whole journey which we're talking about. Obviously for us, this is a far more important thing than just technology, because technology for technology's sake is not what we are looking at. Yeah? So in terms of generating shareholder value, that's very important. At the same time, achieving the net zero emissions, powering lives, respecting nature. All of these are pretty important, and that's what we're trying to achieve in all of these sectors using digitalization. So whether it's in playing a part in returns for shareholders' value by having improvement in efficiency, in improvement in cost, reliability, performance, yeah? Or looking at end-to-end integration using the cloud in deep supply chains, using data in renewable energy sources and in production, distribution, transmission, generation, supply chain, utilization, linked to the grids, off-grid, on-grids. In all of this, how do we actually use technology? And how do we then actually work with our customers in all of this, in powering progress through the energy transition? How do we make our customers who use our products also buy into the technology? What are the kind of solutions which we are going to provide to them? What are the kind of differentiated things which we are going to work with them to achieve for, whether it's in fleet, whether it's in mobility, whether it's in chemicals, whether it's in completely recyclable use of plastics, whether it's in biofuels. In all of these, there's a huge amount of deep data technology which is being used by us. And again, a few more examples of that, we'll go into the detail. We want to be contributing to a net zero world, absolutely. Society will stop adding to the total amount of greenhouse emissions, absolutely. We have set our target at 2050 for net zero. And we are in step with society, with NGOs, with governments, with partners, with technology companies, with suppliers, with everyone on an end-to-end basis to achieve this. This is an integrated clean energy system. You look at hydrogen here, you look at gas here, you look at wind and solar here. Carbonization of energy infrastructure is becoming more and more complex. There are too many aspects which are being taken into account, both from production, distribution, transmission, utilization, end user point of view. When we look at it as a common man, whether we have a two-wheeler, three-wheeler, four-wheeler, and we go for an electric vehicle, what happens on the whole end-to-end supply chain, and what are the kind of things which we've got to be aware of? Where does digital, especially because we're talking about a technology summit here, where does digital play a role in all of this? I mean, this is just an example of the kind of complexity from the generation and distribution point of view. Let's talk about not just hydrogen as a fuel source. Let's talk about CO2 not just as a capture, but several other aspects come into this. And how do you coordinate these power systems while there's a huge demand which is growing? And how do you do better forecasting? How do you do better kind of consumption modeling, flexible modeling? How do you optimize? How do you decentralize the energy systems at scale? Doing that in one small microgrid is easy. Doing it at scale, and that's what is most important. And then how do you have better monitoring of greenhouse gas sinks? How do you do that in a manner which will be useful to society? How do you develop open source platforms where this data can be easily accessible to other companies and to governments? How do you form forums where you collaborate on this, such that this information on greenhouse gas is shared across regions, across the world? So a fantastic way in which technology is actually doing a lot of this. Now let me mention, all of this will not abate emissions. It is only an enabling technology. It is versatile in its essence, and it is something which will allow us new ways of working to have the systematic impact which we are all trying to achieve to transform and decarbonize the energy system. That's the definitive goal. Let's talk about a few of the examples here. I mean, one of the things which we are very proud of, hydrogen, whether it's blue or gray or green hydrogen, obviously the electric mobility, a huge amount of technology, a huge amount of research, not only in the actual availability of stations for charging, and we're talking about tens of thousands, but in battery technology, in storage technology, in condensation technology. And what are the things which we are doing also not by ourselves, but with our partners, So for the past 3 years, we have purchased 2 companies, leading companies, New Motion and Green Lots. And we offer 165,000 charge points across the world. And this is growing exponentially as we speak. We have got several charging points, retail stations in multiple countries where we give the flexibility of charging to a variety of transport vehicles, including fleet. And that's where in fleet we are working with truck manufacturers, with engine manufacturers, to look at fuel, to look at lubricants, to look at fleet optimization, route optimization, and how will all of that have an impact on either a reduction or in terms of efficiency. Both those aspects are being looked at. Yeah? And not to mention the core parameter being, I'm replacing liquids with electric molecules, and that's the most important thing which we're trying to do here. From a digital perspective, by bringing data together, data is the most important one. We are able to understand what is the core, and what is changing, and how do we actually build solutions. Again, whether it's in vehicle technology, whether it's in hydrogen, hydrogen reaction, hydrogen kind of substitution. We have developed one of the largest plants in Western Europe for photovoltaic electrolysis of water to generate hydrogen. It's one of the cleanest technologies available in the world today. What is important is the kind of physics-based modeling and computational science which has gone into the reactors, and the kind of technology which we've developed in this using deep tech and deep data and deep modeling analysis for us to achieve that. The next step in this is where we are looking at, so we are one of the largest chemical producers in the world. How do you actually have reactors which crack ethane but do not use fossil fuel but use electrification? What are the kind of research which is being done? What is the kind of modeling? What is the kind of computational science which is being applied in collaboration with several universities and with several tech startups to say that we will have the reactor of the future which will run on renewable energy and produce a recyclable material into the kind of chemicals which we use every day in our daily life, from the headache pill which we use, paracetamol, to the chappal which we wear, to the bed in which we sleep. All of these use chemicals, and how do we create a sustainable value in this whole chain by using technology upfront from the reaction or the basic chemistry stage itself. That's the kind of goal which we're trying to set for ourselves, and we are achieving it. One of the other examples is Green Lots. I talked about the company which we have brought. So we are running, along with Green Lots, a standard platform where we deploy multiple charge points, and the expectation is that how do customers actually charge? How much time does it take? What are the kind of peak times? How do we actually use the customer charging as a kind of storage point for us? How does that integrate back into the grid? How do we offload it into the grid or bring it back to the customer? Where are the kind of mobile charging which we can allow in these cases? And some amazing experiments using data is happening in this space. And a lot of this is continuously in sync with the customer on their mobile apps through cloud. And we have achieved some amazing success in some initial pilots to the point where we are expanding this across multiple nations. I talked about the fluid dynamic analysis and several other things which we are doing there. In the Shell Technology Center in Amsterdam, in the technology center which we have here in Bangalore, and obviously the one which we have also in Houston, a lot of research is happening here, whether it's in, again, electric, in hydrogen, in waste to fuel, or in recyclable plastics. And in all of this, again, to repeat what is the core theme of what we're talking about, technology and the use of either modeling, artificial intelligence, cloud, deep data. And where do we actually play a role in all of this? In the economy, so that we can have safe storage, safe transportation, safe usage, and end-to-end impact on the supply chain. That's the most important. I probably went a little ahead. Sorry about that. I was probably pressing this. Oops. Can I just get some assistance to go back to the slide, please? Yeah. Yeah. And the last one which I'm going to talk about is, oops. Okay. How do you do this? Is it okay? The energy systems of the future. This is a very profound statement because I talked about several aspects. I talked about liquids, I talked about hydrogen, I talked about molecules, I talked about supply chains, I talked about production, I talked about integration, I talked about partners. How do you actually design and optimize these in an extremely complex multi-carrier systems? Again, doing that on a pilot scale is easy. How do you scale it up to the kind of real world? And that is what is the challenge which we are facing and which we are trying to solve. How do we do this in such a manner that you have both design, integration, system modeling, end-to-end optimization, such that in green power generation or in terms of decision making Where do you actually place your vanes in an offshore wind farm? Where do you place your battery storage? How do you lay out your cables? How do you look at met data? How does met data have an impact on the wind production? What is the size of the vanes? What is the kind of angle? When you bring a ship to the port which is carrying a fuel, how much time can it get in terms of offloading? What is the kind of emissions which will be happening when it's traveling on a particular route? How do you do that emission analysis if you're going into some of the ports where there's a limit on some of the emissions, which is restriction for the amount of time which the ship is in the port? It's an amazing amount of detail and an amazing amount of technology in multiple supply chain, distribution, logistics, warehousing, transportation, production, utilization. In all of these, how do we use algorithms and how do we create a kind of a optimized system which will work seamlessly across countries, across regions with multiple partners with whom we are working? Could be in blockchain, could be, we use a lot of blockchain in trading, in low carbon energy and certificates. Where do we ensure that we have an origin which is clean for these certificates? And how do we use blockchain? Those of you who know the examples of fair trade understand what I'm saying. We are entering into the same zone now. How do we certify that this is clean energy end to end? How do you use blockchain for that? How do you build capacity in blockchain beyond proof of concept so that not only do you know the origin, but you can actually do an equipment verification and such that it will be certified by a regulatory body which is acceptable the world over. We talk about LEED certification, several other certifications. How do you do it in the clean energy on an end-to-end supply chain? And how do you use blockchain for that? Yeah? How do you go beyond that into the transport sector? How do you use blockchain in the transport sector? How do you verify that your hydrogen is green and not gray or blue? How do you do that? And that's the kind of technology which we are bringing to the fore. And while doing that, we are partnering. I mentioned partnering, not only technology partnering, there are not-for-profit companies. The Energy Web Foundation, EWF, is a classic example, where 24/7 insights into renewable energy consumption is being developed along with them by us on a core platform. Yeah? And this is actually designed to match production and consumption. Obviously, a lot of people who have solar panels in their houses in the peak time are actually not in the house, a very fundamental thing. So there's production, but there's no consumption. How do you optimize these things? And how do you then build it into the supply chain in a transparent manner for the producers and for the end users? So this is a solution which is complementary to the energy attitude certification, which is already present in the market. So how do we actually add these things into the scheme, and develop something which is sustainable beyond the proof of concept, 24/7 by 365. Yeah? So this is the kind of work, and much of what I'm talking about is published information. It's available in our website, and it is something which is of deep pride to us. Bottom line, it comes down to we have taken the plunge to the energy transition and to the net zero emission, and through multiple technologies into multiple aspects on the whole end-to-end life cycle, as we like to call it in the wells to wheels. That's what we call it in our conventional, oil and gas technology. We have done the transition to energy on the same well-to-wheel concept without disrupting anything on the supply chain or for the end users, whether it's in any mode. And that's what, in each of these, how do you use technology and how do you derive what is not just a proof of concept, but at scale. And that is what we are trying to achieve. It's a journey. We've made tremendous success. My colleague Dan talked about some of the data in terms of trillions of sensors and data sets and equipment. I'll not go into the details about that. Those of you who were present yesterday must have heard about it. But I want to stress here that this is a journey, and this is a journey where technology is playing a key role on the whole end-to-end, and we are completely proud of it. And we welcome initiatives towards this because that's exactly what we are doing. This is something which we can't achieve by ourselves. This is a huge partnership, and this partnership will enable us to achieve the goal. Thank you.